All right, Buff Nation, what's going on? Hope you guys are having a wonderful start to your day. This is a real treat. Long overdue, but bringing back Steven from QB Spotlight. We're going to be talking all about Shedeur Sanders today, breaking down and talking a little bit about first half of the 2024 season and maybe even taking it back to compare a little bit to where he was at last year with some things. But Steven, thank you again so much for joining the show. Really do appreciate it. It was great seeing you last month here in San Antonio. How you doing, man?
My guy, now you're a fellow Texan back in
Yes.
Texas with me, dude. No, everything is good, man. Doing great. Happy to jump on, talk Shedeur. And as always, anytime I can hang out with you, man, I mean, what a great morning,
Uh,
get my day started.
exactly. Well, that means a lot. Before we dive in to Shedeur, dude, I just want to give you a chance to plug what you're doing over at QB Spotlight and just your work that you do in training as well. So, who is Steven
Yeah.
Hamner?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But at QB Spotlight, we do a bunch of just quarterback breakdowns, a lot of SEC quarterback breakdowns and content. But we do Shedeur most every week just because Colorado fans do a good job showing us some love. So we
Yeah.
tend to like break down the post game, kind of like recap their best throws, quarterback's best throws, and then we'll do like a preview game during the week, and we'll take maybe 5 or 6 quarterbacks each week and kind of talk about what they did well, and then talk about the game coming up and the defense that they're facing and what we think the keys are for success. So again, just some guy on YouTube talking, but for whatever it's worth, we kind of give our 2 cents there. So
Hey, that's what makes it fun.
yeah.
That's what makes it fun. Well, let's dive in, man, to the first 6 games of the season.
Yeah.
Buffs are 4-2. Obviously, Shedeur is playing fantastic football. What have just been some general impressions that you've had of his play so far throughout the season?
Yeah, I think a few things come to mind. I think number one, it's been an extension of last year. Like you've seen what he did last year well, and it's continued to grow. Number two, besides the Nebraska game, there hasn't really been like that dud of a game, if that makes sense. Like even
No.
like last year, you had Oregon and USC was a dud of a game for the first half, and Oregon State. You had a few like duds thrown in there. Excuse me, but so far there really hasn't been that dud besides Nebraska. And then point number three, which I think was more relevant this past game, and I know y'all lost against Kansas State, but it was his ability to make others around him better, which I think is the best quality for any quarterback, especially any NFL quarterback. Like when all those receivers went down, like it was almost like they still had the same offense essentially because Shedeur was that quarterback. There were some NFL style throws that led them back to take the lead at the end of the game. So I think that was pretty evident that maybe he wasn't able to show as much last year because Hunter was healthy for most of the year. He missed those few games,
Yeah.
but you had like Jimmy Horn, you had all these like stud receivers, and then this game against Kansas State, when all of these guys go down, it's like Shedeur didn't miss a beat, and so it's his ability to make others around him better. That was kind of like my main takeaway, at least watching the game last week, and then if I'm thinking about the season as a whole.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I let's dive into this
Okay.
Kansas State game a little bit
Yeah.
because yeah, it wasn't one to where of course you wish you could have gotten the victory, but it was great to see us come back there in the fourth quarter, take the lead. What were some of the throws that really stuck out to you that were really kind of eye popping while you were
Yes.
watching the game?
So I think it was either the last it was either the second or last touchdown thrown by Shedeur. It was a deep out from the right hash to the left side of the field. Was that which touchdown was that? What am I thinking
Yeah,
of?
to LeJontay Wester.
Yeah, and so that's an NFL style throw, like before the receiver even turns, high press situation. That's an impressive throw, and then another impressive throw, which I believe one of the receivers got hurt on, which sucks. It was a deep ball to, is it Miller, number 4?
Yes,
Okay,
I think he broke his ankle on that play,
yeah, so
man.
that sucks. That ball that he threw was pretty spot on. So even with Shedeur taking some like unwanted sacks, and it's not just like I thought he's improved, by the way, holding the ball
Yeah,
this year. I know this previous game there are some deeper sacks that you don't want, but even with him taking those sacks, there's still like NFL throw after NFL throw. But those two throws kind of come to mind. End of the game, that deep out, and then that deep throw to Miller that he got hurt on. Also, maybe it was his first touchdown or second touchdown where he's scrambling a little bit using his legs. I think it was in the end of the third quarter when their comeback kind of started. He's able to kind of like, excuse me, buy time, go up the middle, and throw. I think they're inside the 10-yard line, but that's something he's done well with this year. I think even more is throwing on the run, using his legs to buy time and throwing the run. So a few of probably the better throws that he threw against Kansas State.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought this up because,
Sorry.
yeah, I feel like overall Shedeur's pocket presence has been better this year compared to last year. Credit to him, credit to the offensive line. I think that that while it has been perfect this year, I think we've seen improvement. But I remember talking with you last year. You said sometimes even though Shedeur can hold on to the ball, sometimes how when you're watching that, you're kind of willing to live with that. I would love for you to kind of break it down why you're okay with that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you coach that, but
Right.
while you're able to, or why you're okay with it, seeing it happen on the field.
I think it's part of his game that, some of these plays wouldn't happen if he didn't hold on the ball that long, extend the play, roll out, and find Travis Hunter downfield. So if that wasn't part of his game, maybe those sacks aren't there, but also those bigger plays aren't there either. So not that you want those sacks, you want to coach against it. I mean, 3rd and 18 is freaking hard to convert, so not that that's okay to have, but as long as he's making some of those really big plays to keeping the game, you can live with it while still training to get better at it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So you want to continue that development, but it's something you can live with as long as he's improving and it's not getting worse. And it's not, enhancing your chances of losing, essentially.
Yeah. Deals is bringing up here. I can't bring up the replay right now, but this is good that, that last play Shedeur had Wester on the slant open for the first down. I'll need to take another look at it, but I think that play at the end of the game with the pass interference, I think some people have brought that up. Oh man, maybe there's some guys open the middle of the field, but let's talk a little bit more about the season as a whole. Well, actually, before that, when you're working with quarterbacks or, you played for a little bit in college as well, was there anything that, like the coaches would try and do with you to try and work on a little bit of that, having good pocket presence, not drifting into pressure or sliding or rolling into pressure? I know it's a lot easier said than done. than being live than having live reps, but I'm curious, kind of what do you see quarterback coaches and offensive coordinators try and work with their quarterbacks on?
Typically it's like that internal clock they'll talk about, like you have your reads, let's call it your progressions, right? You got your first, second, third read, go through your progressions, and then when that internal clock goes off, you need to make a decision. And so with Shedeur, I think that's kind of what you see at times. And the decision is hold on to the ball and let someone get open. But that's kind of what you're talking as far as like pocket presence is keep your eyes downfield. You don't look at the pass rush. When you start looking at the pass rush, that's when you get happy feet, which is not one of Shedeur's issues. At least I don't think it is. I think he does a good job maneuvering in the pocket. And so, but as far as like getting coached, it's go through your reads, go through your progressions. Don't look at the rush. You're actually taught to throw wherever the rush or wherever the blitz is coming from. That's the open space. So just throw it right where that guy came from. He's leaving an open space. So either someone has to come down to cover that space, so you throw it to that space, or you just hit that space where that guy is coming from. So as far as it relates to like the blitz and getting rid of the ball quickly, which I think he's done a better job of, by the way, and it's still something you're working on, but I do think he's done a better job getting rid of the ball quickly and letting his receivers have the opportunity for more like yak opportunities, like some more like these big plays are maybe happening on like an 8-yard throw over the middle, and the receiver is able to continue and run as opposed to like a deep ball or something. Not saying that he doesn't throw those deep balls, but I've probably seen a little bit more of that, at least to the naked eye. Like, hey, ball's out quick, it's out to my receiver. He's able to have some yak opportunities and pick up some bigger plays that way.
Yeah. This was something that I brought up going into Kansas State with some of the Kansas State guys that I talked to, is that against UCF, and we kind of talk about that performance a little bit because this was a lot of fun. That game was like a big, I feel like, statement game for CU this year, and Shedeur was fantastic. But I think 14 dropbacks against the blitz against UCF. 94% completion percentage. That was awesome. It was awesome to see. what what have been kind of your takeaways, or when you were watching that UCF game
Yeah.
that really stuck out to you?
Man, UCF was fun. My favorite thing about that game, though, was the fact he threw a pick early and then like bounced back. Like those are my favorite things when you're watching a quarterback. Okay, how are you going to respond to adversity when you make a mistake? How do you respond to it as opposed to when everything's going well? And so I thought in that game, I thought
Yeah.
they got the run game going a little bit better and they're able to have success on the ground. And I thought that I think the passing game helped open up that run game a little bit throughout the game. They were able to rely on it, as opposed to Shedeur throwing and throwing and throwing. Like, I don't even think he had over 300 yards that game, which for Shedeur, more times than not, he's going to have 300 plus yards throwing. So
Yeah.
I think the passing game helped open up the run game. And like, that's a game like last year, like that type of game is a game Colorado probably loses, right? Like, in all seriousness, like if you compare some of the teams they lost to last year, they're on that like UCF style schematically,
Mhm.
and they blew them out. And so, yeah, I thought it was good from Shedeur bouncing back from an early pick. We saw a little bit of everything. You mentioned versus the blitz, but he was great when they dropped 7 or 8. He was great utilizing his legs on the run. And at the end of the day, like, hey, we just find Travis Hunter. That's always a good thing too. So I thought he did a little bit of everything against UCF and did it really well.
Yes. Yes. No doubt about it. I'm curious,
Yeah.
Steven, kind of looking from like a rehab standpoint and just like taking care of your body throughout the week. That's something obviously I think that Shador does really, really well. Uh, a big part of his game, we talk about it. I have talked about it all the time. Is just he embodies toughness. He's willing to hold on to the ball sometimes and extend plays, and
Yep.
he'll welcome the hit if it means he can take a play or take a throw downfield, have an opportunity for that. But in order to kind of get up for every game, every week, you got to be taking care of yourself. So
Yeah.
I'm really curious from your perspective, what are some things that quarterbacks specifically normally do to kind of take care of themselves between games? Um,
Yeah.
Maybe that might change kind of throughout the week, day to day. And is
Sure.
there anything different that maybe Shador or other quarterbacks kind of do when they hit a bye week?
Sure. And I think that's a great question. So I think obviously you have your recovery as it relates to the hits you're taking, and that's more for every player. But as it relates to just the quarterback, there's a few things that stand out, and even like the college guys will work with is number one, when they start like losing power, like sometimes they feel like they're losing power, losing velocity during the season. Most of the time, it's because of like mechanics faltering that leads to like some shoulder fatigue and leads to like less power being developed in the lower half going up through the chain. So making sure they have like a good core regimen is,
Mhm.
is pretty important. And making sure that there's still like power being trained throughout the season. Now, it doesn't have to be the same type of power work that you're doing in the off season, but you still want to tap that energy system. It's the same energy system you're using when you're throwing the ball. And then making sure mechanically like you're staying on top of things, because that's usually the number one thing that leads to like shoulder fatigue or elbow
Hmm.
fatigue during the season. It's not so much the reps, just for the simple fact, like if you compare a pitcher to a pitcher to a quarterback, like their volume is higher, and they're also the velocity of their shoulder is moving literally 8 times faster than a quarterback. So they have a lot more stress going on in speed compared to a quarterback. Their arm isn't moving that fast compared to a pitcher. But when it moves fast repeatedly under kind of these like suboptimal throw mechanics, that's when it can lead to some fatigue. So it's like making sure throw mechanics are on point. I know he's got his quarterback coach that's there often, so probably staying on top of him with that
Yeah.
recovery, making sure like your shoulder is feeling good and you're doing the right things from that standpoint. And then also getting ready to throw. Like, I don't know what his exact warm up routine is, but it looks like it's a pretty good routine from the outside looking in with some med ball work, some power work, and some rotational work. So it's kind of making sure all factors are working together. But I think it does start with mechanically making sure that's on point, and everything follows under that.
Yes, yes. And in terms of like after game,
Yeah.
for for instance, there have been like a few games like against Baylor, man, where uh, I mean, we got to talk about that game, but
Yeah, that's crazy.
we'll start with this first. Incredible game, overtime, all of that.
Yeah.
He took some big hits in that game. Is there anything you're doing like immediately right after the game that quarterbacks do for recovery with the body as well as the arm?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people ice, some don't. It's a debated topic, like in the field. I would say most of the guys we work with prefer not to ice. You know, it's more like traditional, old school thinking. But at the same time, if someone's icing, like if someone who's been playing in professionally for 10 years says, "Hey, I have to ice," I'm going to listen to them and say, "Yeah, let's go ahead and do it." So I think it's an individual thing as far as like if you're icing. I think typically like after the game, like depending what the injury is or depending what you're beat up on, you want to get some blood flow to start the recovery process. But like games like that, when it's like 10, 11 o'clock, like you probably just want to go to sleep, you know? So I think it's almost like not thinking too much, like, hey, just go get some rest. And when the morning comes up, we'll go ahead and start the treatment process. Now, again, it depends on what the actual injury is or what you're beat up with. Sometimes with like our baseball players, after they pitch, I'll have them go ahead and do an upper body and core workout because they're already fatigued upper half. And so I want to go ahead and knock that out at the same time that you're fatigued. Let's go ahead and knock out your upper body, your shoulder movement, so you can recover tomorrow as opposed to training tomorrow, then recovering the next day, if that makes sense. So I think it's going to be individual based. That's probably not the best answer, but I think it's pretty individual and depends on what you're kind of like beat up on.
Yeah, no, that's super insightful. And going back to this Baylor game,
Oh my gosh. Bro,
incredible
yeah,
ending, right?
yeah,
I just want to get your thoughts on the ending. If you have anything else on the game, that I know
yeah.
I'm asking you to go back a few weeks
No, no,
now,
it's
but
great.
just what your thoughts were.
I thought the game was over. Like I was, I don't know if you remember, like when you texted me that one video a few weeks ago about some offensive line questions, I texted it to my guy who played
Oh
with the
yeah, yeah.
Packers and Panthers. So he played at Baylor, and so he's texting me during the game, and like I'm about to fall asleep because I'm an old man with kids, but like this game's keeping me up. I'm like, hurry up and finish. So I can go to sleep, and and so he texts me like before the Hail Mary, or I know some Color fans don't think it's a Hail Mary, so whatever, but
Oh, I
before
didn't
the
know that.
I didn't either until I was like, well, what's a Hail Mary? But anyways, like, yeah, I got some of my comments saying it was a design plan, whatever. Most Hail Marys are design schemes somehow. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's a whole different topic. But before the last play happened, my buddy from Baylor texted me. He's like, let's go Baylor. And so I thought like he was ahead of me in the game that Baylor won. So I was like, oh, wow, okay, great. I guess Baylor won. Good for you. Then that play happens. And then he texted me like a second later. He's like, no, I hate this, blah, blah, blah. And so, but it was crazy. And the overtime to happen. I think my biggest takeaway from that game, though, by the way, is I think it was the third quarter. They had two like huge plays of Travis Hunter back to back that eventually led to a touchdown. One, Travis Hunter just went up and made a play. The other one was a nice design play. I think Hunter was on the right side of the field, kind of sneaked out to the left side. He was kind of wide open. But it was a good reminder, like, hey, in critical situations and big time moments, just find your best player. That's what Colorado tends to do, and that's what they did there. But yeah, what a game, man! I'm sure that kept you up for a while. I'm sure you were talking to Colorado fans for a while after that.
Yeah, man. Like, I don't think I went to sleep till like 4 hours after the
Oh
game
my
concluded,
gosh!
which was just insane. Like, my adrenaline was just going like crazy,
Yeah,
just watching it over and over. And um,
right.
it's kind of funny because Shedeur's definitely, if you're making a mistake on defense and you're making that kind of over and over, he's going to make you pay on it. And it really just kind of did surprise me how, I know that there's some debate at the end with the first attempt downfield at the end of the game to Will Shepherd, whether he was going to get into the end zone or not if he had caught it. I like to think that he would have, but to come back, and it was kind of strange them still kind of play a similar
Yeah,
um, defensive scheme there at the end of the game to where it left one-on-one coverage again for one of their
right.
receivers, this time Lejante, and made them pay that second time. It's crazy. It's
Mm,
crazy to me sometimes what we see him do,
it
but
is. Yeah.
I was so impressed with his composure at the end of the game, and to make that same throw again right after when there's no time left.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's when people talk about the Brady mode.
Yep. No, but I think it's a great point. The composure, like he
Yeah.
stays the same, which is so cliche, but it's what all the really good quarterbacks do, right? It's like, hey, big moment, small moment, 1st and 10 from the first play of the game, or 4th and 10, Hail Mary status in the last play, whatever. It's like the exact same. I think it's a great point.
Mm-hmm. And I guess too this is gonna kind of zoom out a little bit, but
Yeah.
I've long talked about for like the last month or so how I just really do feel like the Nebraska game for us was a nice turning point in the season, kind of like how we bounced back afterwards. That led to a nice 3-game winning streak. I think that we've been playing better football like ever since then. So, that's been great to see. It was also great to see kind of Shedeur looking back at UCF throwing a pick early and bouncing back and playing completely different than what we saw against Nebraska. But I'm curious, from your playing experience, from the guys that you work with too, can you kind of tell when a team is going to bounce back from a game in which the outcome and the performance is really disappointing? What makes the difference, I guess, with a team and particularly an offense, that's able to bounce back after rough weeks like that?
It's a good question. I think you'd have to be there internally. Like the coaches could probably answer. Like us, if you're a fan, you're like, yeah, I knew they were going to bounce back because I'm a fan. I believe in them.
Yeah.
Like me, I was like, oh man, this is going to be rough. Like if I'm being honest, I was like, this may not be a good season. Like after the Nebraska game, I was like, this is the same exact Colorado. Like if they get dominant line of scrimmage, they're going to hit Shedeur, and maybe they won 5 or 6 games. Like that was my thought process, right? I'm not a fan. I just casually watch and enjoy football. If I'm a coach, like something that would tell me that we're on the right direction or not is, let's say after the game, if there's a bunch of like bickering and finger pointing, then maybe I'm like, this could be a long season. If there's like some camaraderie after a struggle like that, or if that game leads to some camaraderie, which I think it did, like after the Colorado State game, you really saw it. Like it was a slow start and they came and took care of business. And I think you saw like some camaraderie after that game. So I think if it leads to camaraderie, then you can say, okay, I think we're having a turning point. If there's like bickering and finger pointing, you may not be in for a long season. So again, don't know what it was like behind closed doors. Those are 2 different scenarios. Like if we were coaches, that's kind of what you're looking for, if that kind of makes sense.
That does. Yeah. And I think it's been helpful too, Stephen, that again, it's, looking back, it's just really hard. Like last year, for instance, when everybody's new, all the coaches are new, essentially all the players are new. And I think sometimes that can be difficult for like kind of creating, that team leadership structure to some extent. But now like you got guys that have been there for a year, they've been through it. You're seeing kind of more and more leaders like establish themselves and all of that. And I think that that's also made a huge difference. Just again, like with any sort of rebuild, having that continuity, having a lot of your core players return for the next season, I think that that's always going to help people bounce back. And but one thing that we got to do this week is bounce back against Arizona. This is going to be a really fun matchup because Noah Fafita, Tet McMillan, they're quite a combination. Over with the Wildcats. And then we got some great news, Steven. I don't know if you saw this, but Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn are expected to suit up. So we should be with our full complement of starting wide receivers. We got some depth guys that are out now in that dogfight last week that got hurt or banged up. But I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of preview anything with this matchup right now, but if you got some keys for Shedeur against Arizona, would love to hear them.
Yeah. I'll throw 3 keys your way. Then, maybe you can add to it or talk about it. But I think number one, it's going to sound so cliche, but Noah Fafita has turned the ball over 9 times or 9 receptions. I think he's got 8 picks or 8 touchdowns and 9 receptions, where Shedeur has like 17-4. So if I'm Shedeur, like if you just take care of the ball, the chances of their quarterback throwing a pick are fairly high. He hasn't had as good of a season this year as he had last year. So if you take care of the ball, they're probably going to give you an extra possession or 2, especially because they have one main guy to throw to, and he's phenomenal. But you've got 3 or 4 guys you can throw to. They got one main guy. I think point number two is to win the game, because I think Arizona's defense is better than maybe people would think. I think they've played better, but their offense has put them in bad situations. So I think you're going to have to do a little bit of everything if you're Shedeur. Like, be good against the blitz, like we talked about. Be good when they drop 7 or 8. You're going to have to utilize your legs and scramble a little bit. Pretty much every game, Shedeur's had to do a little bit of everything, but I think it's no different in this game. For them to win the game, he's going to have to do all those things and do it well. And then I think like the last key or two, if I have to think of something, is can you get the run game going? I think that's a big question. And can the pass game help open up the run game like it did against UCS? That's maybe more of a question than a key, but I think that could be a big factor in who wins the game. I'm not sure like what you previewed or kind of what you think from a quarterback perspective. That's probably what I have from Shedeur going up against Arizona.
Those are great points, because with some statistics I was pointing out earlier this week, they kind of help with that. Locked On Buffs put this out on Twitter maybe yesterday or Monday. I thought it was a really interesting stat. With this offense and with Shedeur, man, like this is going to be predicated. This offense is going to be predicated from Shedeur, from the passing game, as it should be. So you don't need like a crazy 200-yard rushing game. Like we don't need a rushing attack like what KSU or NDSU has in order to be successful with this offense, right? We just need kind of some sort of heartbeat of a run game just to keep the defense honest, right? So in Colorado is 4-0, Steven, this year when they've had 14 or more designed run calls for their running backs. That's it. They're 0-2 when they've had less than that.
Wow.
Which I think is pretty interesting. Yeah. But I think throughout this 3-game winning streak, I think that we've had kind of closer to that 20 or a little over that 20 range. I think that number 14 might have come from that first game against NDSU, where we still didn't really run the ball much with the running backs. So I thought that stat was really interesting. Like we don't need necessarily like a dominant running game. Of course, would love to be dominant in every phase, but sure. We just need somebody to keep the defense honest. From your experience, what does having at least somewhat of a threat of a run game help the quarterback with and the offense in general?
Huge, just for the simple fact, like you're taking a defender out of like pass coverage to potentially have to help with the run, and that's going to help. Like that just makes the space so much more open. Like when guys drop 8 back, even though I think Shedeur is good at going through the defense and processing, that's a lot of guys and that are defending the pass. That's 8 against 4 receivers, 5 running backs going out. The likelihood of that's just in the defense's favor. So if the defense has to bring a guy in the box, so the defense has to be more worried about the run. When you drop back to pass, that's less guys that you have to read and process. Like it's not rocket science. It's fairly simple. You know what I mean? Like if you just think about it through that key, and it makes a difference as a quarterback. Like you can tell when guys are dropping back, or when guys are blitzing, or when guys are kind of like hesitant, seeing what's going to happen. They're out of position, and all you need is like one false step from a defender, and one of your guys is going to get open. So I think it's a huge deal. Huge deal.
Yeah, and want to give a shout out here as we wrap up here to Reverend BJ Nelson. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat. Salute to my guy Dave. Thank you so much, and appreciate everybody starting your morning here with me and Steven, just talking a little bit of Shedeur. Really does mean a lot. And I want to throw this out. I know that this is kind of another topic here, Steven, but another guy that I've just been really impressed with has been Jordan Seaton. As a true freshman left tackle, I think he's really held his own. And any specific thoughts right now on Jordan Seaton, or just speaking to the difficulty for someone of his age to be doing what he's doing right now?
Yeah, super impressive. Hopefully that leads to more good quality offensive linemen coming to Colorado. But yeah, super impressive stuff, man. That's huge.
Yeah, he's been great. Well, Steven, really appreciate you hopping on. We gotta make sure we get back into routine doing this now
Let's
that
do
I'm
it.
kind of getting settled more in San Antonio. But I've gone ahead and linked your channel in the
Oh,
description.
awesome.
Guys, go over to the QB spotlight. It's not just Shedeur, like you said earlier, it's a bunch of SEC quarterbacks as well. But Stephen, we'll love to hear from you. Are there any specific videos or breakdowns on other players that we can look forward to seeing from you
Yeah.
as the week and the season goes on?
Yeah, I mean, we just put out a Shedeur video yesterday, I think, talk about Arizona, see if you're kind of interested in that. And we have like some film we break down, but it's broadcast footage, so it's not the best quality. We got to slow it down, but it does a
Yeah.
good enough job helping get the point across. But yeah, if you're in Texas and you're interested in what we think about Quinn Ewers against Georgia or Connor Wigman against Mississippi State, we have some of those videos out as well. So it's always if you're a quarterback junkie, and it's kind of fun, and I'm kind of a weirdo like that, so.
Nah, man, it's great. Really appreciative again of your time, Stephen. Big fan of what you do. Yeah, let's be sure to connect here,
Let's do it.
especially after this Arizona game. I think that's there's going to be a lot to talk about after this one. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody in the chat, again, Reverend BJ Nelson for the cup of coffee this early. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'll be back with the Buff Blitz later tonight. This time at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Till then, guys, go Buffs.